Every time white dudes pass out around each other, they always do some borderline gay shit when the guys are sleeping. Frank fell asleep, so he like stuck a carrot in his ass and put shaving cream on his balls. Like, why, motherfucker? Why would you do that to a friend of yours? He trusted you enough to sleep around you. You gonna put a carrot in his ass? Is that nice? I tell you right now, if I put a carrot in a black dude's ass, a nigga will kill you when he wakes up for some shit like that. That is an automatic death sentence on the street. It's a rap for you. I'm gonna kill that motherfucker. I thought y'all was friends, baby. What happened? I fell asleep at his house, right? We was drinking, and I fell asleep at his house, and while I was sleeping, right? I'm just gonna kill that motherfucker, all right? That's all you need to know. And fuck carrots.
All right, you gonna have it going. Hey, matter of fact, here. You gotta have this too.
Boy, what the fuck? Boy, is you cool?
What you mean?
What the fuck is this?
They say I'm so gay I can't even
bro,
drive
stop
straight.
Playing with me, bro. For motherfuckers come back there and get on that with you, boy.
What you mean? What I do?
Hey, bro, keep that shit to yourself, bro. You tweaking, boy.
I'm not charging you for it. I'm saying you can have it for free.
No, bro, I don't want none of that shit, bro. Stop playing with us, boy. Hey.
Don't eyeball me, tough guy. When I was in the joint, I fucked guys bigger than you.
They told me it was going to be like a prison.
How do I measure up to your cellmates?
You're dangerous.
I haven't tried any sex moves yet.
The fuck you mean, sex moves? Do I look like... brother, you know, you're saying you haven't even tried any sex moves yet. Are you...
Am I gay?
Yeah.
Would it make a difference?
Are you?
Why would it make a difference?
You said to me, I haven't even tried any sex moves on you yet. Yet? What the fuck you mean yet? I'm a grown-ass man. Yet? On live TV, I will fuck you up. Trust me.
I only meant it as a joke.
Okay, well, you should have laughed afterwards. Because I didn't laugh.
Shall I tell you, the conversation went, I said to you, what do you think I'm an okay cellmate compared with the guys in prison? And you said, I think you're dangerous. And I said, and I haven't even tried any sex moves yet. It was just a joke.
Can you answer the question, though?
I'm just interested, would it matter to you if I was?
You said you haven't even tried any sex moves on me yet. Do you know how I fuck you up in here? Do you know that?
Don't you disrespect me by suggesting that...
Suggesting that what?
Suggesting that my answer might in some way make me less of a man in your eyes?
I think you're less of a man for not answering.
I think it's like a joke. It was just a joke.
You know what would be more of a joke? You know what would really be more of a joke? If the 24 hours ended right now. You understand? That would be more of a joke.
In the U.S. military, SARC stands for Sexual Assault Response Coordinator. A military SARC briefing is a presentation or training session provided by the Sexual Assault Response Coordinator, SARC, at a base or unit. The SARC is the primary point of contact for managing sexual assault prevention and response programs in the U.S. military. When I was in training in the SARC briefing, to my joy and then disappointment, I saw an African-American man conduct the training. I was excited because we are going to get a unique point of view on the subject. At the time, I started studying subjects outside the conventional norms, with conclusions of fact that would cause cognitive dissonance, but I'd come to terms with the reality of the facts presented. As this man was presenting the data and curriculum, I noticed it was uncomfortably one-sided and focusing only on issues concerning women, so I raised my hand and dispensed the crux of the briefing. "Yes, young man, you have a question?" the instructor asked me. I replied in a manner to convey that sexual assault is not gender exclusive. Men are also known to be sexually assaulted as well. Looking at me with the side eye of contempt, he slowly, but in a way wrestling with his own dissonance, replied, "I don't know about all of that. There was literally over 110 of us in this class, and I'm thinking to myself, who in the hell hired this civilian contractor?" This information can be dangerous or helpful, depending on the framing of the curriculum. I was so disappointed. After every week of training on Friday afternoon, our instructors would give us our briefing to be on our best behavior on the weekends. The irony of the briefing was that the women, E5 and above, were the only ones making sense when it came to these SARC briefings. One in particular said that, yes, even though it doesn't get reported as often, men do get sexually assaulted, so watch each other's backs this weekend. A few weeks pass, and Friday afternoon brief comes. Men can be sexually assaulted. Each time it seemed like my service brothers and sisters broke their military bearing just to look back at me with the validation that I didn't want. On the contrary, I wanted something different, and it was sort of a consolation prize I would get during graduation. Before graduation even came, while standing in formation, a group of guys were engaging in horseplay. At the time, I'm pushing 30, and I don't have time for the banter and boisterous play of the straight-out-of-high school adults. But as they were smacking and pinching each other, one of them boldly ran up behind me and started rubbing me on my chest. And I swung on him, plain and simple, and I would do it again at my current age because at the end of the day, that's assault. Because what man wants to be groped by another man in that manner? Naturally and fortunately, he dodged it, but if that punch would have connected, my military career would have been over before it even started. Was it worth reporting? I don't know, but I do know the next man's coping abilities would be much different than mine, as we are not monoliths. Also, I don't think my therapist has seen any negative effects from that incident, so this is the personal freebie that the audience gets. Graduation comes, and a man of Asian descent gave the final sexual assault briefing. He proceeds to tell a story about a serviceman that got assaulted. To paraphrase, he said the man was held at gunpoint and forced to perform fellatio to his male assailant. He further explains due to the circumstance of the crime is the only reason why it was reported. Whenever I have a conversation with a woman and she says, men cannot be sexually assaulted, my respect for them dies a little after each word that follows out of her mouth. But then I catch myself. I was no different than her at one point in my life, so I'll try to educate her. If after her point of view has not even been enlightened, then I resume my impression of her. On the surface, this just seems like a black man reacting normally to a white male's banter, and we all have a good laugh not to play with a black male in that manner. But in an A&E documentary, Biography, Bobby Brown, he recounts being placed in temporary custody at a supposedly religious facility where a Catholic priest tried to molest him. Brown said, "He tried to touch my private parts. I just knew I didn't like being touched." He described fighting back and escaping, and noted that the trauma really bothered me as a child and as a grown adult. He also shared that the incident contributed to his later struggles with drug and alcohol abuse. Male survivors of sexual assault are often erased from mainstream narratives, with social myths portraying men as invulnerable or always willing participants in sex. For black men in the United States, these credibility challenges are compounded by historical legacies of racialized masculinity, systemic stereotypes, and cultural stigma surrounding victimhood. This video examines the cultural and historical roots of divergent responses between black and white men to unwanted same-sex physical contact, such as playful grabbing or touching. While white men often interpret such behavior as harmless jest, black men frequently respond with resistance or retaliation. Labeling the latter response as insecurity is disingenuous, as it ignores the central issues of bodily autonomy, historical trauma, and racialized constructions of masculinity. Through a critical lens informed by history, sociology, and cultural studies, this video reframes the discussion around consent, respect, and the lasting impact of slavery-era practices such as buck breaking, while also exploring the disbelief faced by black male survivors of sexual assault today. In contemporary discussions of masculinity, race, and sexuality, a persistent cultural paradox emerges. White men often engage in playful homoerotic touching with minimal social consequence, while black men tend to reject or retaliate against similar gestures. Some frame this difference as an expression of insecurity in black masculinity. However, this framing oversimplifies a complex interplay of consent, history, and cultural policing of manhood. At the same time, broader conversations about sexual violence have historically centered women, overlooking the unique struggles of male survivors, especially black men. Surveys estimate that 1 in 16 men in the United States will experience sexual violence in their lifetimes. Yet when black men disclose, their accounts are more likely to be disbelieved due to layered stigma, racial stereotypes, and systemic erasure. This video argues that black men's resistance to unwanted same-sex touching and their struggles for credibility as survivors cannot be reduced to insecurity. Rather, they represent assertions of autonomy, dignity, and resistance against historical and ongoing structures of emasculation. The roots of this difference extend back to slavery. Enslaved black men were subjected to sexual violence in the form of buck-breaking, a practice in which enslavers raped or assaulted black men to establish dominance and humiliate them in front of their families and communities. Buck-breaking was not only physical abuse, but also a tool of psychological warfare, branding black men as emasculated in the public eye. This history produced intergenerational trauma and a cultural emphasis on rejecting behaviors associated with humiliation. For black men, even joking sexualized touching can evoke echoes of coerced submission. Resistance became a form of survival and remains a cultural marker of self-protection today. White men. In many predominantly white contexts, fraternities, sports teams, or liberal subcultures, men engage in homoerotic horseplay, such as butt slaps, groping, or nudity, as a demonstration of secure masculinity. Their racial and social privilege insulates them from having their manhood questioned, and playful same-sex touching carries few stigmas. Black men. Masculinity is heavily policed for black men both within and outside their communities. Stereotypes of hypersexuality, criminality, and weakness intersect to create narrow definitions of acceptable manhood. Retaliating against unwanted same-sex touching is not insecurity, but an act of self-definition against forces that continually attempt to emasculate or over-sexualize black male identity. At its core, unwanted sexualized touching is an issue of consent. To dismiss a black man's resistance as insecurity erases his fundamental right to bodily autonomy. No man should be expected to tolerate invasive behavior under the guise of humor. The difference in responses between white and black men is less about confidence versus insecurity, and more about social position, historical burden, and cultural boundaries. Labeling black men's resistance as insecurity shifts blame onto the victim while excusing the initiator's behavior. This framing perpetuates harmful stereotypes, painting black men as irrationally defensive or violent. In contrast, white men's tolerance of homoerotic play is often praised as progressive masculinity, ignoring the privilege that allows them to engage in such acts without historical baggage or racialized scrutiny. Beyond playful touching, male survivors face disbelief in cases of sexual assault due to male rape myths. These myths include beliefs that real men cannot be raped, that men should be able to fight off assailants, or that male arousal implies consent. Such myths remain widespread, shaping public attitudes, criminal justice responses, and the willingness of survivors to disclose abuse. For black men, disbelief is compounded by racialized stereotypes. They are often presumed to be perpetrators rather than victims. Studies of African American men show that childhood sexual abuse was frequently minimized by families and institutions, reinforcing silence. Broader work on diverse male populations indicates that black men in particular fear being perceived as weak or emasculated if they disclose. Other research highlights their double erasure, first as men in a field that prioritizes female victims, and second as black men in a society that stereotypes them as dangerous rather than vulnerable. Systemically, black boys and men are more often labeled as offenders in child welfare and criminal justice settings, making recognition of their victimhood even less likely. Men are often socialized to suppress vulnerability, with anger as the most socially acceptable emotional outlet. For black men, this pressure is magnified by cultural memory of emasculation. From slavery's buck-breaking to contemporary stereotypes of hypersexuality, this dynamic fosters silence, underreporting, and cycles of disbelief. Black male survivors are less likely to report than white male survivors, though prevalence rates are similar. When they do report, they often face skepticism, minimization, or ridicule, rooted in both male rape myths and racial bias. Service providers frequently lack the training to recognize or validate male, and especially black male, survivors. The black-white male sexuality conundrum cannot be reduced to personal insecurity. It must be understood within a framework of racial history, cultural constructions of masculinity, and the universal principle of consent. Black men's resistance to unwanted same-sex touching is not weakness. It is a legitimate assertion of dignity, respect, and autonomy. At the same time, the stigma surrounding male victimhood erodes credibility for all male survivors, but especially for black men who carry the additional burden of racialized disbelief. Any discussion that fails to acknowledge historical trauma, particularly practices like buck-breaking, and ongoing systemic bias risks reproducing the very dynamics of power and erasure it seeks to critique. Recognizing and validating black male survivors is not just a matter of justice. It is a public health and human rights imperative.